What's up, everyone? Ink Jedi here. Before we get to our interview with the creator of the Dead End Kids, Frank Gogol, I just wanted to make a quick little, pre-interview video letting you know that there was some audio issues in the beginning, but we didn't miss much of the interview. Me and Blake were able to interview Frank Gogol about his new book, and we probably missed like 3 or 4 minutes of the beginning. So if it starts at a weird place, that's just due to some technical issues. As you'll hear in the interview, we're gonna more than likely have Frank back onto the show, and we'll touch on some more things. But I just want to get that out the way before we start the video. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and head over to Instagram and show some love to Frank and myself, and he'll give you all that information at the end of the podcast. So with that said, enjoy. Peace.
For a little over 3 years now. I wrote my first script in 2015. I published my first book on Kickstarter in 2017. Had my first book in print last year. It was called Grief. Came out through SourcePoint Press. And now I've got my second book, Dead End Kids, my first miniseries, coming out starting this July.
Great. So one of the questions that I think every creator gets asked is, what were the first comic books you read, and how did those kind of influence you to want to become a writer or a comic book writer?
All right, I got a pretty good answer for this one. It's probably going to be a curveball answer. Two comic books really influenced me. The first one was in 1997. I picked up, it was called Spider-Boy #1. It was from Marvel and DC's Alchemum universe. It was essentially a Spider-Man crossover with Superboy. And it was just such a hot garbage comic that I didn't touch another comic book for 9 years. I own the copy just so I can keep myself honest and never write a book that bad. I should really flip it open and see who wrote it so I can go thank that person for almost ruining comics for me. The second comic that really sort of started me down the road of getting to where I am now was Spider-Man 528. It's the first red and gold costume leading into Civil War.
Oh, wow.
I picked that up. I think I read in my local newspaper that Spider-Man was getting a new costume. I was a senior in high school, and I went to my local shop. I ordered the book, and after that, it was a wrap. I got all the tie-ins for Civil War. I think I bought 3 issues of each Civil War main series issue. I don't know. I went nuts with it afterwards. I've been sort of a weekly reader, like Wednesday Warrior, ever since.
Very nice. Awesome. So speaking of Marvel, I guess, if you were given the opportunity to work with either Marvel or DC, what characters or series would you want to work on?
I think there's 2 answers to that. It would definitely be Marvel either way. But if Marvel was going to give me a crack at a particular character, it'd sort of be a 3-way tie between Iron Fist, Black Panther, or Hawkeye. Hawkeye's by far my favorite, and I think he needs a good tune-up. He kind of gets beat up and made into a joke a little bit, and this is a dude who runs with Thor and Iron Man and Captain America, and all he has is a bow and arrow. I feel like he's a pretty serious contender. Same thing with Iron Fist. I feel like Iron Fist needs a good Mortal Kombat style story, something even deeper than what Brubaker and Fraction did. And then I like Black Panther's probably one of my favorite characters for sure, and I don't want to write a long run on it. I feel like I'm a white guy. It's not a character that I want to take a whole lot of time with. But if somebody gave me a one shot or even a backup, I'd like to leave my mark on that character somehow. Right. The other answer to this question was, if Marvel gave me free reign to sort of pitch any book I wanted, I would pitch a new volume of Dark Avengers that had Sentry, Namor, and Moon Knight as sort of the trinity of characters, sort of like a really messed up, mentally insane, arrogant take on the Avengers, almost like what Hickman did with New Avengers, but with all of the heavy hitter time bomb characters.
Wow.
I love that. I love that. You hit it on the head with putting Moon Knight and Sentry together. That's
I
actually.
mean, that's like the screwed up Batman Superman book right there. And then
yeah, exactly.
in,
and I mean, if Hawkeye taught us anything in Endgame, it's that he's badass. So I mean,
100%.
Definitely can use a reboot. I love it. So you mentioned your comic anthology Grief, which you said was originally funded on Kickstarter before being printed by SourcePoint. How has crowdfunding online kind of changed the way you see creators breaking into the comic industry?
I think sort of like right now is probably the best, most sort of fertile, easiest time for anyone to ever make a comic. Like anybody with, no matter how bad the script is, as long as they've got a little bit of money to get it made and the sort of tenacity to finish a fundraising project, like can get a comic book made. And it wasn't like that before, and it's getting easier with, you know, the internet connects to everybody now, and artists are more available than ever. Resources for becoming a comic book writer are more plentiful than they've ever been. So that crowdfunding in general, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, stuff like that, are definitely a little bit of a game changer, and they're contributing to sort of the diversification of publishing comics. Like I said, it's easier than ever, and that's a big part of why you're seeing like new indie publishers popping up all the time. You've got Scout and Alterna and SourcePoint Press, my publisher. There's like a dozen others that came out in the last year alone. Ahoy, I don't know, Wave Blue World. They're just sort of popping up all over the place, and that is very much a testament to how crowdfunding and all these other things have sort of really made it that much easier.
It kind of would make it also, it makes it a little harder too, don't you think? Just because, I mean, you can get lost in the sea of so many creators. It might be hard to stand out unless you get
that's 100% true. But not if I could like tout SourcePoint Press for just a hot second. One of the things I think that makes them stand out is that they've really dug into particular niches. Like if you look at some of the other small publishers, they sort of, some of them are doing superheroes, which, if you ask me, is a bad idea. There's a lot of superhero stuff going on out there, and there are people who do it better already. SourcePoint Press runs with pretty much sci-fi and horror, two sort of lesser tapped genres. The other thing that's sort of making them stand out for me is we do about 70 conventions a year. So like the ground game is much different and stronger. Like there are some weekends where we're in 3 and 4 cities in different parts of the U.S. And small like basement or dirt mall cons to New York and San Diego. So like the net is being cast very wide, and we're putting the books in people's hands, and it's the people creating the books putting the books there. Like I know Zenescope, who they're buddies of mine, so like this isn't a knock at them, but they usually have a couple people who work for them that aren't creators, who go and work a show, and then they'll hire a couple of good-looking ladies to come help them sell the books, and that's definitely a model. It's definitely a model that works, but I think for me, I'm much more interested in, you know, somebody who created the book, who's very passionate about the book, telling me about the book, putting it in my hand, and getting my money, rather than some sort of faceless corporation, for lack of a better word. Again, I like those guys at Zenescope a lot. That is not a knock at them. It's just a way to illustrate the difference.
Right.
Different marketing tactics, right?
100%.
Some work for some people, some work for others.
Yeah, I've definitely bought books from Zenescope. Like it does work.
I have a couple too. For real.
I don't even remember buying them. I remember being attracted by somebody much better looking than me, guy and a gal, and just walking away with the books in the end. It's crazy.
So for Dead End Kids, you're working again with Savitikin and Reinhardt, who are an artist and colorer for you on Grief. How much easier was your experience creating Dead End Kids, having 2 other people on your creative team you've already worked with and were kind of comfortable with?
I mean, in the obvious ways, it was easier to work with people I've worked with before. Nenad Savitikainen, who did half the art for Grief, I think he drew 5 or 6 of the stories and did the colors on a few of them. And Sean did all of my lettering for pretty much every project I've ever done. So I've worked with them before. We've been working together for a few years. And when I started developing the project, I didn't necessarily start off thinking of them as being the guys for the project, but about halfway through writing it, I realized I was writing it for them, and the sort of vision I had in the book, or for the book rather, was something that I knew that they could execute on. So it's, this was my first miniseries, and that had its own sort of learning curve. Jumping up from short stories and anthologies to a 3-issue mini is it's definitely a learning experience. But having those guys along for the ride, and bringing everything they could do to the table and helping me level up, really, it was a pretty smooth process. I think Grief took us about 8 months between me and the other 10 collaborators on the different stories. I think it took me about 3 weeks to write the first draft of Dead End Kids. I probably had it nailed down in about 2 months, and then production on it took maybe 3.5 months. So like we did this quicker than we did Grief, which probably says a lot about how much we've all sort of grown since Grief, and just how well oiled a machine it was from working together before.
Yeah, I mean, from your website and reading your blog, I kind of looked over your writing process and your organization, and I can tell that probably plays a part on the efficiency of getting the book done, the script done a lot faster.
Yeah, I for my day job, I work at a tech startup that is in the financial space, and I am the marketing guy.
Oh, wow.
And when at a startup, like, it's a handful of people. There are 6 people who work in my office. So I tend to have to be very data driven and very organized, and do a lot of things that I'm not used to doing and sort of learning on the fly. And like, I bring a lot of that to my comics, and part of that is me experimenting. Like, there's an article in the blog which I don't update nearly enough, but there is one where I sort of track the progress writing Dead End Kids, and I think the first draft was done in about 8 days, and like, that was really just a stress test to see if I could write fast, or if I, like, someday if I write for Marvel, I'm going to have to pump out a script that's good enough to be drawn once a month, for as long as the title runs. And I like to know, like, where I'm at, and like gauge it and see if I can push myself a little bit more. Like, I do the same thing in the gym. Like, if I can bench 200, I see if I can bench 205, and that's how we grow, right? We push ourselves and adapt.
Yeah, I do the same. Mine's, not the gym, it's Taco Bell, though. If I can eat one taco, I'll see if I can do another. But...
Listen, man, everyone needs a passion. Everyone.
So you, obviously, with Dead End Kids, are a 90s kid. It's a coming-of-age story set, in the 90s, which I'm a 90s kid, too. So after reading the first issue, I felt right at home automatically. What were kind of the biggest influences from the 90s that you just absolutely had to make sure were in the series?
I don't know that, like, I purposefully, like, went through and like planted Easter eggs or anything like that. Nanad did a lot of that in the art without me asking him to, and I think that he did, just enough that it wasn't like in your face. Like, there's a lot of posters in
yes.
Amanda's room, and little references.
Like you were living in the world.
Yeah. I'm actually, I've never done the math, but I think I'm actually probably a year or two younger than these kids would have been at that time. The book's set in 1999, and I'm 31 now, so like, I'm probably just a touch younger than these kids, but I wanted to set the book in 1999 for sort of narrative reasons. One of the core themes of the book is about change, and sitting in December 1999, right on the cusp of the new millennium, sort of played into that. And then it gave that sort of 1999 sandbox gave me a lot of cool stuff to play with, like the stuff that's going on with Amanda's mom. You couldn't really tell in 2000 or 1989. That's very specific to 99. But I think, whatever like was sort of nostalgic for me, like a big part of the reason why I wrote the book was because when I turned 30 a year and a half ago or so, I was starting to feel nostalgic. I started, remembering things like hanging out outside and building clubhouses in the woods and being in before the streetlights came on, stuff like that. But the more I thought about that kind of stuff and remembered it, the more I remembered that, like, those supposed golden years of childhood, especially for me, weren't that great. Things weren't awesome at home. Like, both of my parents really struggled with drug addiction when I was a kid, and there's a lot of me bouncing around and staying with friends and stuff like that. And all the kids I grew up with, sort of lower class, lower income households, sort of dealt with similar and different problems. And like, a big part of the reason we were building clubhouses in the woods was so we didn't have to go home, so we could have somewhere else to be. So like, less so than tapping into the 90s stuff. I was tapping into what I remember from around that time that happens to be the 90s. I always think of Stand By Me, the movie based on Stephen King's novella The Body. It's about a guy in the 80s reminiscing about his childhood in the 50s, and sort of this was my version of that.
That's what I was actually going to say too. It really reminded me a little bit of Stand By Me, had a little feel of that, but in a different way. I mean,
so since, you know, like you said, a lot of the influences for you, Frank, were, you know, building forts in the woods and being home before the streetlight. Do any of the characters in the series kind of reflect or mirror anyone you grew up with, friends, people you just kind of knew, things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think all the characters, especially Murphy, the main character, definitely have a little bit of me in them, like sort of different roles I played in my friend group and different things that were going on. So Murphy's sort of backstory that you get a very little bit of in the first issue is that he's in a foster home situation, and the people raising him aren't his parents, and he's very resentful and angry about something. And growing up, like when I was younger than 13 and 14, and when I was 13 and 14, I was a pretty angry kid. Some messed up stuff had happened to me already by that age, and a lot more was coming my way in the later years, and I was just like confused and sort of lashing out, and like I channeled a ton of that into Murphy. And then some of the other characters are based on friends I grew up with and little bits of myself. Some of it is pop culture too. Like I don't think a lot of people are going to pick this up, but it is a fun little Easter egg for me. The character of Tank is based visually on Bobby Hill from King of the Hill.
I was getting that vibe a little bit, so I dig it.
Yeah, and the neighborhood bully is based on Fred Durst a little bit. The sort of crotchety old man in the neighborhood is based on Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, which isn't necessarily set in the 90s, but it was the reference. And then there's a fun spot where maybe Clint Eastwood beats Fred Durst up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it was a fantasy thing. But yeah, there's definitely parts of me in there. There's definitely sort of parts of my friends and other people I've known, and just sort of 90s nostalgia stuff in there. Like I tried to, with each of those four main characters, I really tried to make them relatable on some level and like really give them something for the reader to care about, because I always think of like a horror movie, like like a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street. Like you've got this cast of like 5 or 6 people, and like throughout the film they're going to get picked off one by one, and like you just don't give a shit because they don't spend any time giving you a reason to care about them.
Right.
And like my first effort whenever I write something is to like spend time making sure people care about these people, because like I think people come to a book for the concept. Like you hear about Batman, you're like, oh, dude dresses like a bat and he fights crime, that's great. And then you read the book and you're like, okay, this is a guy who never grew up and is going to have this endless war on crime because he's so traumatized. And like you stay for that, like you stay for the character, and like sure, the cool factor plays a huge part of why you stay too, but if you don't connect with the characters in a book, you're not going to stick around for issue 2, and like that's a huge problem with indie comics. Like how do you get people to come back for the second one, like, or the third one? Like, and beyond that, like you're starting to lose sales no matter what. So like you gotta do everything you can to really make people care. And if I could toot my own horn, I hope I did a pretty good job with these 4 kids. And then when you get into issue 2, you're going to get some background on some of the other characters, and it's going to sort of flip the script and make you think differently about them, especially Bulmer.
Yeah, I think you, reading through issue 1, I think you did a good job of making the characters relatable. I think Juan and I are both excited to see where that's going to go. I think horror comics are something that really should be making a big boost or a big comeback. That Image does a good job with them, but
I think so. I really what was the Joshua Williamson series, Nailbiter? I mean that's sort of like a play on Scream and all the sort of horror, not horror, but like thriller mystery horror books around that style, and like I feel like they really nailed that. And there's a couple like Witches from Scott Snyder, like I thought was sufficiently creepy, even though it had like some problems with the story and stuff.
So So Dead End Kids is a 3-issue series. First issue comes out
July 24th.
and second issue is
I don't know the exact date, but it'll be the end of July, the end of August, and the end of September. It'll be sort of the window for it.
what do you have any projects you can talk about that you're working on for after Dead End Kids? Do you happen to have anything with sci-fi maybe? I know you were talking about
I actually I'm writing a sci-fi book right now that is way too early to talk about. It's greenlit. It will be coming out in 2021. So like I work way ahead. So this is a ways off. But sort of the low-level pitch was the original pitch that I started with was what if a xenomorph got loose in the Power Rangers Megazord? Sort of a sci-fi horror book, but with like a really strong like human hook, and again a reason to care about these characters. There are 5 characters akin to the Power Rangers, and if I kill any of them and people don't care about it, I didn't do my job.
I mean, you mix aliens with mech suits, and I'm on board.
Yeah, no, I mean I can tell you that the climax of the fight is like a mech versus kaiju fight, but the kaiju is an alien, and that's not really giving away too much.
So Source Point, you said, does just about every convention in the book. What conventions are you yourself going to be at this year?
Left on the schedule, I will be at Ace Comic-Con in Seattle in 2 weeks. I will be at San Diego 2 weeks after that. Let's see. I'm on the schedule for Boston Comic Con in August, Toronto Comic Con in August, Rose City in September, New York in October, possibly Baltimore. The way that's going to work out is Grief is currently in the running to be nominated for a Ringo, which are awarded at Baltimore Comic Con. So if anyone listening feels so inclined to, before June 20th, head over to the Ringo site and vote for Grief for Best Anthology. You can help me get there. But yeah, I'm getting married in September, and so I wanted to sort of leave a couple weekends around that open. So Baltimore sort of is an if. And I think
Congratulations on the wedding.
Yes, congrats.
Yeah, luckily I have a very understanding fiance, and we planned the wedding around the convention schedule. And yeah, I'm trying to make sure I do still get married and not stress her out too much, because it's a little more push, and I might not be getting married.
Well,
yeah,
so
I've got
Comic Book Fiend Club members, go to that site. Vote for Grief for Best Anthology.
Yeah, we'll definitely put the word out there. Absolutely.
Appreciate that. I have a good feeling about it. I think a buddy of mine, David Pepos, who does Spencer and Locke over at Action Lab, he had his first book come out last year. It's called Spencer and Locke, and he somehow like got in the running for like best writer, like against Tom King, and like best artist, best colorist, best new series, best new talent. Like, I mean, he found a way to make this work, and he gave me a lot of the tips for like rallying people to do the voting and stuff. So hopefully his luck and his ambition have rubbed off on me. But yeah, I will be at plenty of shows for this year. I think LA Comic Con is in October, and I think I'll end up at that one just because it's not too far from me. I can get there in a couple hours, and that's sort of an easy weekend trip. But yeah, I'm trying to get all over the place, and I was plenty of places earlier this year. I was in Chicago, I was in Seattle once before already. I was in Houston. Last weekend I was up in Northern California for a really small convention. So like, I'm getting around. Size of the show doesn't really matter, but mostly it's the bigger shows. And if anyone listening to this at a later point, hears it and wants to come say hello, definitely do. You don't have to buy a book, but if you want to come, shake my hand and shoot the shit, I'm all about that.
Hopefully you'll see some Comic Book Fiend Club bests coming up to your table.
I've already met a few. I actually, I don't have my camera on right now. You guys can't see it, but I've got the Gwen Stacy Comic Book Fiend skull magnet here on my desk.
Very nice.
Love it. Love it.
And the same dude gave me like a sticker and a pin, and like you guys have you have more merch than I do.
Yeah, we definitely throw down on merch pretty hard.
Yeah, I've definitely met a few guys, and like they're super passionate, and like I'm so glad something like this exists. There's not enough sort of like groups in comics for whatever reason, like, and everybody enjoys the same thing, and it feels so very siloed still, and it's, you know, that's sort of like an old school, like, you know, basement dwelling mouth breather kind of view of things. But like I love the community aspect. That's why I go to so many conventions, like meeting people and talking and like making friends and networking and all that stuff. Like, so I'm super glad that you guys do what you do.
Great, thanks. Yeah,
Thank you, yeah.
We have fun doing it.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'm interviewing you.
Juan, did you have any other questions?
I just wanted to know, like, as far as like we were talking before about crowdfunding and how, you know, Kickstarters actually opened up a lot of doors for people to kind of fund their own kind of projects. What were some of the more challenging aspects to doing that sort of thing?
Everything. Every single thing about it is hard, especially if you've never made a comic before or never run a campaign before. So right off the bat, one of the things I had working against me was I had never done any sort of large-scale printing. So like I ran the Grief Kickstarter as a digital-only campaign, which, you know, a lot of people still aren't really into digital comics, and I get that, but like that was the option that was on the table for me. So I tried to put together like the best book I could, like, you know, the package of the book really good, make the book really like hit home like as much as I could. And I tried to put together like a really good looking smart campaign within the sort of bounds of a digital only box. And I set like a really modest goal. I think it was like $1,500. And it, like, I don't know, people just, you know, I think people notice when people put effort in and when there's like, they're passionate about what they do. And we ended up hitting the first initial goal of $1,500 in like less than 10 hours.
Wow.
And the campaign went on to make, I can't remember the exact number, but just like shy of 4,000 maybe. So like, I think, there were plenty of, you know, challenges. Like there's a podcast, Comics Launched, by Tyler James Vogel, who also runs Comics Tribe, the publisher. I think at the point that I was doing this, there may be about 100 episodes. I listened to every single episode of that podcast twice. I took notes. I beta tested the page with people to make sure that like it looked good and it worked and that the reward tiers made sense. I sort of crowdsourced a lot of like help for it, and you know, I don't know. Like I said, I put as much into it as I could, and I think it paid back, you know, more than I should have gotten out of you know what I had to work with, and that's just a testament to like how powerful crowdfunding can be, like especially if you have a book that is a little different or that really speaks to people. But B, like, you know, the idea of crowdfunding and crowdsourcing and reaching out to your network and building your network is so crucial to being an artist of any kind, writer, artist. You know, if you want to knit shit and put it on Etsy, like anything you want to do, like, yeah, you have to ask for help, and you have to be willing to take it.
Right.
Not sure if that answers the question.
No.
I told you I'd ramble.
No, perfect.
That definitely answers the question. I mean, there are a lot of creators out there that are definitely going to want, you know, tips and to know how difficult it can be to really put it together.
Well, if anyone listening like needs tips or advice or direction, like I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to throw my social media out there at the end of this. Definitely hit me up. Like I love helping people. I like paying it forward. A lot of people help me get where I'm at, and I definitely want to help the next people get to where I'm at, because like that's just, you know, good karma, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you have any? I think you had some more questions, Blake.
No, I think that's it for questions. Thanks for answering everything. If you have anything else you want to plug or add, Frank?
I guess let me give like a formal pitch for Dead End Kids, since that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in addition to everything I've said so far, like the actual sort of hook for Dead End Kids is it's three kids in the late 90s trying to solve their friend's murder. So it's Stand By Me meets the Hardy Boys, but sort of more violent. At its core, though, it's really a book about these four kids who come from really fucked up households, who find one another and sort of learn to rely on one another and find stability in one another, and what happens to that stability when one of them is murdered, and how they start to spiral and you know, it looks at the question of like, do the things that happen to us sort of define who we end up becoming in a pretty objective way. If I was going to pitch it as like a genre, I'd say it's an anti-coming of age story. Like it plays with the model of the coming of age story, but yeah, right on the first page it says it's not that kind of story. It goes sort of in a different direction. I think anyone who's a fan of Hardy Boys or Stand By Me or Stranger Things should definitely check this book out. First issue and the second issue are both solicited now. Issue 1 comes out July 24th. That is MAY1918. The second issue comes out at the end of August. I think August 21st. And that is order code JUN191916. June 19116. And yeah, just go. You don't need to remember those numbers. Just go tell your comic shop you want Dead End Kids from Source Point Press. They'll be able to look it up and just put in an order. We have the initial orders for number 1, and like they're really solid for a first-time indie book. It's definitely going to crack the top 400 books the month it comes out.
Nice.
If people listening, want to help hit the top 300 and get that first issue to a second printing and stuff like that, those are all huge things for a new creator. So definitely go check out the book if it sounds interesting to you. Definitely go vote for Grief for best anthology Ringo if you have the time and you feel so inclined. It's all these little things that really help boost up indie books and new talent.
Yeah. Supporting indie comics is important. Absolutely.
That's right. It's like buying local, but for comics with more guilt.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I loved the first issue enough that I went ahead and had my store order it. So, I got one for you. Why don't you go ahead and hit everybody with your social for us, so
sure.
they can talk to you, follow you, whatever they want to do.
All right, Instagram's my favorite, and I think I actually follow a fair number of your guys on there already, but it's just my name, Frank Gogol, FrankGogol, all one word, because I have nothing to hide. Twitter, it's the same thing, my name, one word, but I hate Twitter, but it's the sort of darling of the comics industry, so I'm on there, and I put on a brave face for it. I don't have a Facebook fan page because they're nonsense and Facebook doesn't let them amount to much, but I do have a Facebook profile. If you're not crazy and you know how to be the least bit respectful, definitely feel free to shoot me a friend request. That's what social media is for, connecting with people and engaging, and I'm happy to do it as long as people aren't psycho. And that's just I think I've got the lock on my name there too. I think it's facebook.com/frank.gogol or something like that. My Facebook profile picture and all my other profile pictures are the same. So if you can find me on one, you can find me on the rest.
All right. So, guys and gals, remember, go give him a follow. Chat with him if you have some questions. And Frank, I just want to thank you again for coming on and chatting with us today. It was a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you guys for having me. I was really excited about this one actually. Like I said, I've been following what you guys are doing for a while now, and I've been syncing up with a lot of the people who are in the group, and I really appreciate that something like this exists, and to be able to get in here and be a small part of it for a half hour, 40 minutes, it meant the world to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Anything we could do to help lift up people in the community and get people out there and get them, kind of just put a spotlight on them. We really like that. As we're a club. As a club, we're very self-made. And we always respect people who hustle hard and go after it. So thank you so much for coming on and being our guest. And, we'll spread the word. Everybody go vote for Grief for the Ringo Award. So that way, I'll be at Baltimore Comic Con. So it'll be great to meet Frank in person. I know Blake will be there as well as yep. A ton of other East Coast members. That's our big con for the year. So
dude,
it'll be great.
Make it so I can meet these guys.
Absolutely. So I guess with that, guys, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Blake, thank you for coming on, and a very, very special thank you to Frank. And as the months go on, right before release, we'll make sure we'll plug this on the Instagram, we'll plug it on our Twitter and our Facebook, we'll send it out there, and plug it on the website as well. So make sure you go tell your comic book shops that you want to read Dead End Kids. With that, guys, I want to say thanks. Have a good night. Peace.